All right, welcome to another deep dive. This time we're getting you ready for a cemetery attendant interview. Now, you've already got the RoleCatcher Career and Interview guides, so we're going to jump right into how to use those to really prep for these questions.
Sounds good.
Now, did you know that the cemetery industry is actually getting pretty high-tech? GPS grave locators, even like automated mowers.
Really?
Yeah, but before we get to that cool stuff, let's tackle some sample questions you might get asked in an interview.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, that's what we're really here for.
Right, absolutely. And like understanding what the interviewers are looking for is like super important, to really nail those answers.
Yeah, so let's start with one that I think is super common. Can you describe your experience working with burial plots and grave markers?
Hmm.
Now, this seems pretty straightforward, but what are they really trying to figure out when they ask this?
I think they want to know, like, do you actually understand, like, the physical aspects of the job, Are you familiar with the different types of markers, different types of materials, Any experience you have with their maintenance or repair?
So I guess it's not enough to just say, oh yeah, I've seen some headstones before.
No, not really. You really need to show that you have some hands-on experience. Have you dealt with granite markers before? Bronze plaques? Have you ever had to like level a leaning headstone or like repair damage from, weather and stuff?
That's interesting. I guess this is also where some of those unique situations you've been in can come in. Like maybe you've had to use like old maps to locate a really old grave. Or maybe you've dealt with a marker that's been damaged by some kind of crazy weather event. It's those stories that can add some depth to your answer.
For sure. Specific examples are really, really important. Oh, and also this is where RoleCatcher's AI can be really helpful. You can use it to analyze the job description and really highlight the skills that they're looking for in your response.
So it's like having a guide to emphasize all the right experience, huh?
Exactly.
So now let's talk about time management. The next question is, how do you manage your time to ensure all tasks are completed efficiently? Now, in a cemetery, it's not just answering emails, right? You've got a lot of really sensitive responsibilities. So how do we showcase that we know how to prioritize without just listing off methods?
Right. So I think the interviewer really wants to see, how you prioritize things like preparing grave sites while you're also handling visitor inquiries
Right.
or, managing a landscaping project, those kinds of things.
That's a lot to juggle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you think? How do we respond to this question?
Well, I think back to a time when you really successfully juggled multiple tasks, maybe under pressure. Were you in a fast-paced environment? Did you have to meet deadlines? What about unexpected situations? Like,
hmm
share how you stayed organized and prioritized those tasks and got everything done.
I like that. Really paint that picture for them so they can see you in action. Now, the next question kind of brings in like a key element of cemetery work, which is, how do you ensure that the cemetery is maintained to a high standard for visitors?
Hmm.
Because it's all about creating that peaceful and respectful environment.
Absolutely.
So what specific things should we make sure to touch on in this answer?
Okay, so it's not just about like cleanliness, it's also about safety and aesthetics. Think about maintenance schedules, mowing, trimming hedges, cleaning the benches and the other public areas. Really show them that you're thinking about the whole visitor experience.
And don't forget about the safety protocols,
Right, exactly.
like making sure pathways are clear and addressing any hazards,
Mhm.
and especially making sure people are safe during funerals and memorials. You mentioned earlier that the cemetery industry is using more technology these
Oh,
days.
yeah, for sure. Modern cemeteries are using, like irrigation systems, automated mowers, even GPS grave locators now.
Oh.
So if you have experience with any of these, it's definitely worth highlighting. It shows you're up to date and adaptable, right?
Yeah, so it's not just being comfortable with the like traditional elements of the job,
Yeah,
but you're embracing these new technologies too.
totally. And speaking of technology, RoleCatcher's AI can actually analyze your responses and like suggest ways to make them even better. So for example, if the job description really emphasizes landscaping, RoleCatcher might suggest you include examples of how much you know about different plant species and things.
Feels like having a little assistant helping you refine your answers.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive into a question that's really at the heart of this job. Can you describe your experience with burial services? And this is where I think attention to detail and respect are super important. So what do you think? What are they looking for with this question?
I think they want to understand how familiar you are with the whole burial process. So from preparing and setup to cleanup. Have you ever assisted with lowering a casket, setting up chairs for mourners, coordinating with the funeral director, All of these things require a very specific skill set.
And it's a highly emotional environment, too. You have to be able to stay composed and respectful, but also be efficient at your job.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
But also don't be afraid to mention experiences from other jobs. Maybe you haven't directly participated in a burial service, but you've worked in a setting where you had to have similar skills, like event setup. Or maybe you've provided customer service in a sensitive environment or something. Just highlight how those experiences have prepped you for this role.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's about showing them that you can adapt and excel in this unique setting. Now, for a question that I think requires a really delicate touch, how do you handle difficult or emotional situations with families during burials or visits? And this is where your empathy and communication skills really come into play.
Right. It can be a challenging part of the job for sure. And the interviewer wants to know, that you can handle these situations with grace and professionalism.
So how do we prepare for this without sounding like a robot or rehearsed?
Yeah, I think about times when you've provided support to people or maybe resolved conflicts in really emotional situations. Like, have you ever had to de-escalate a tense interaction?
Yeah.
Or offered a listening ear to somebody who is just distraught? Think about what strategies you use to stay calm, stay compassionate, but still address the situation.
It's all about sharing those real-life examples, right?
Totally.
Let them see your human side, your ability to connect with people, but still maintain those professional boundaries.
Exactly.
It's not easy.
Yeah, it's tough.
And, sometimes just remembering these experiences and actually figuring out what to say can be hard. And this is where I think RoleCatcher's AI can be really helpful.
Oh, for sure. RoleCatcher can actually analyze your answers for, emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And it can give you suggestions, like how to soften your language, or give examples that show you can listen actively and offer real support to people.
That's awesome. It's like having a coach helping you figure out that balance between empathy and professionalism.
Totally.
All right, let's move on to a question that tests your attention to detail and how organized you are. How do you ensure that cemetery records and paperwork are accurate and up to date?
Oh, yeah, this is a big one. Accuracy is super important for this job. Cemeteries deal with so much sensitive information, burial records, plot locations, even death certificates. So the interviewer wants to know that you're meticulous and reliable.
Right, because you're dealing with people's most sensitive information.
Exactly.
So how do we highlight those skills? What kind of examples could we give?
Okay, think about any experience you have with data entry, record keeping, or even just taking really detailed notes in your past jobs. Have you ever caught a mistake that saved your company money or time? Things like that show you pay attention to details and you care about accuracy.
And what about how technology is being used more for record keeping now? The career guide mentioned digital databases and software specifically for cemeteries.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. If you have experience with those systems, definitely mention it. It shows you're adaptable. And you can work with different tools, even if your experience is from a different field, like if you've used databases for customer management or tracking inventory or something. Highlight those skills.
So it's all about showing them you can transfer those skills to this setting.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, this next question might seem kind of daunting, but it's really about showing that you're aware of the rules and committed to following them. How do you ensure that the cemetery is compliant with all relevant regulations and laws? So you don't need to be a lawyer, but you should have an idea of the regulations for cemeteries, right?
Yeah, you don't have to know everything, but you should have a general understanding. Things like zoning requirements, environmental regulations, burial permits, those kinds of things.
So how do we show that we're aware without getting too technical or legal?
I think focus on your willingness to learn and follow the rules. You could say something like, I'll learn all the regulations before I start. It shows initiative.
I like that. And if you've worked somewhere before that had regulations,
Oh, yeah, good point.
like healthcare or food service,
Definitely mention that.
you could use those examples.
Yeah, and highlight how you made sure everything was compliant.
Perfect.
It shows you can adapt to these environments.
Yeah. So now for a question that lets you talk about your love of nature. Can you describe your experience with landscaping and horticulture?
How fun.
Cemeteries are basically landscaped parks, right? So this is your chance to show off your green thumb.
Yeah, totally.
What kind of things should we talk about here?
Anything related to gardening, lawn care, even plant identification. Have you ever designed a garden, maintained a lawn, taken care of houseplants? These all show that you know and appreciate nature.
And if you have, formal training in landscaping or horticulture?
Doesn't mention that.
Oh, absolutely. It gives you credibility.
Yeah, it shows you're serious about it.
Right. Oh, and RoleCatcher's AI can also help you here. Like, it can help you structure your responses to make those skills really stand out. You can put in your experience, and it'll suggest ways to highlight the relevant parts and tailor your answer to the job description.
It's like having a career advisor right in your pocket.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, let's move on to the final question for this section, which is about creating a welcoming and inclusive space for everyone. How do you ensure that the cemetery is welcoming and accessible to all visitors, regardless of their ability or background?
All right, good question.
So this one's about understanding diversity and inclusion. They want to see that you care about making it a respectful and accessible place for everyone who comes to the cemetery.
So what are some key things we should talk about here?
Think about physical accessibility. Are there ramps for wheelchairs, accessible restrooms? Is the signage clear and easy to read? These are all so important.
Yeah. And what about cultural sensitivity?
Yeah.
I mean, cemeteries serve diverse communities with different religious practices.
Right, that's super important.
So are there multilingual signs, brochures, maybe designated areas for different practices?
Yeah, exactly.
It's all about the details
For sure.
and how they make the space inclusive. So I think these questions really show how multifaceted this role is. It's so much more than just maintaining the grounds.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's about being a caretaker, a facilitator, and a compassionate presence for people, both for those who are grieving and those who come to remember.
I like that. That's a good way to put it.
And it requires a unique blend of skills,
Yeah,
from like the technical stuff to emotional intelligence.
you got it.
Now, before we get to some final tips and strategies, let's look at some of those career insights we got from the RoleCatcher Career Guide.
Okay, sounds good.
Because it's not just about doing well in the interview. It's also about understanding what this career could look like long term.
Right.
And the Career Guide mentions some things like stable job growth, maybe becoming a supervisor or manager, and how important it is to keep learning new things.
Exactly. And you can use these insights in your answers, too, to show you understand the industry and that you're committed to growing. Like when you talk about technology, you could say you want to stay updated and maybe even pursue training.
Yeah, it shows you're not just looking for a job, you're looking to build a career.
Exactly.
So that brings us to some final tips. We've gone over the questions, we've practiced what we're going to say, we've even thought about our career goals. So what else can we do to really nail this interview?
All right, well, it's all about those final touches that make you stand out. Like, first impressions are huge, especially in a sensitive place like a cemetery.
Right, so what about clothes? What should we wear to the interview?
I think you want to look professional and respectful. So think neat, tidy, and appropriate for the setting. You probably don't need a full suit. But, clean clothes, polished shoes, well-groomed. These all go a long way.
It shows you're taking it seriously, right?
Yeah.
You understand what this environment is all about.
Exactly. Oh, and don't forget about body language. A firm handshake, eye contact, a real smile. Those can all create a good connection with the interviewer.
It's about showing confidence, right?
Yeah, and warmth.
Okay, now what about those behavioral questions that they like to ask? Like, tell me about a time when...
Oh, yeah. Those can be tricky if you're not ready for them.
Right.
But they're really just a chance for you to show off your skills.
So how do we handle those?
Well, think about times when you had to solve a problem, or you showed teamwork, or leadership, or when you went above and beyond. Have some of those stories ready to share.
Like the one from before.
Yeah.
About exceeding expectations.
Oh, yeah. Perfect example.
Now's the time to, really polish that up and have it ready to go.
Exactly. Oh, and RoleCatcher's AI can help here, too.
Yeah.
You can use it to brainstorm stories and even get feedback on how to tell them better.
So it's like having a storytelling coach.
Pretty much.
Okay, now, what about those awkward silences that can happen in interviews?
Oh, yeah. I hate those.
They feel like forever.
Right.
So how do we use those moments to our advantage?
Okay, well, instead of freaking out, see them as a chance to show you're really listening. Take a breath, think about the question, maybe ask for clarification if you need to. You could even ask the interviewer a question.
I like that. It shows you're engaged.
Totally.
Speaking of questions, always have some ready for them, too.
Yes, a good point.
It shows you've done your research.
Exactly.
So what kind of questions should we ask?
I would think about the cemetery's challenges, their plans for the future, or even the day-to-day stuff you'd be doing. Asking those questions shows you've really thought about it.
That's great advice.
Oh, and here's another tip. Take notes during the interview.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it shows you're paying attention.
And you value what they're saying.
Exactly. Write down keywords, things you can use when it's your turn to ask questions.
So we're showing that we're actively listening and engaged.
That's it.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I think it's important to highlight how valuable RoleCatcher's AI is. From fixing up your CV to practicing for the interview, it's a great tool for anyone getting ready for this kind of job.
Definitely. And don't forget, it's not just about the technical skills. Connect with the meaning of this job. Show them you care about maintaining this place of remembrance and honoring those who've passed away.
That's a really good point. I think that kind of authenticity will really resonate with the interviewer.
I think so too.
All right, so we've covered a lot.
Yeah, we have.
But before we finish this deep dive, I think we should talk about some more of those finishing touches.
Okay, good idea.
Things that can really make a difference.
Let's do it. It's a tough job. You really need to show you can handle those situations with empathy, but professionally too.
Right, it's a tricky balance.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to remember those experiences and actually figure out how to put it into words. This is where I think RoleCatcher's AI can be a lifesaver.
Oh, absolutely. It can analyze your answers, see how much emotional intelligence they show, and it'll even make suggestions, like maybe ways to soften your language a bit or provide some examples that demonstrate active listening and how you offer genuine support.
So it's like having a virtual coach.
Yeah, pretty much.
Helping you find that perfect balance
Exactly.
between empathy and professionalism.
Okay.
So let's move on to a question that really gets into your attention to detail and organizational skills. How do you ensure that cemetery records and paperwork are accurate and up to date?
Yeah, this is a big one. Accuracy is super important in this role. I mean, cemeteries deal with a lot of sensitive information, burial records, plot locations, death certificates, everything.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So the interviewer wants to know that you're really meticulous and that you're reliable when it comes to all those records.
Right, because these are people's most sensitive information.
Exactly.
So how do we really highlight those skills? What kinds of examples should we be ready to give?
Okay, so think about any experience you have with data entry, record keeping, even just like really meticulous note-taking in your previous roles. Like, have you ever caught an error that saved your company time or money? Those examples show that you really pay attention to the details and that you're committed to accuracy.
Yeah, those are good examples.
Yeah.
Now, what about technology? It seems like it's being used a lot more now for record keeping. The career guide mentioned digital databases and specific software for cemetery management.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point. If you're familiar with those systems, make sure you mention it because it shows you can adapt and that you're comfortable with modern tools.
It's about showing them you can keep up.
Yeah, exactly. And even if your experience is from a different field, like if you've used databases for customer management or tracking inventory or something, highlight those skills.
It's all about showing that you can transfer those skills to a cemetery setting.
Right.
Okay, now this next question might seem a little intimidating, but it's really about showing them that you're aware of the rules and that you're committed to following them. How do you ensure that the cemetery is compliant with all relevant regulations and laws?
Ooh, yeah.
So you don't have to be a legal expert or anything, but you should have a general understanding of the regulations that apply to cemeteries, right?
Yeah, you don't need to be a lawyer or anything, but you should have a basic understanding.
Okay.
Think about things like zoning requirements, environmental regulations, burial permits. All of that is important.
So how do we show them we're aware of these things?
Yeah.
Without getting too bogged down in the legal jargon.
I think focus on your commitment to learning the procedures and then following them. You could say something like, I would make sure to learn all the relevant regulations and procedures before I start. It shows you're proactive and willing to learn.
Yeah, I like that. And if you've worked in an environment before where you had to follow regulations,
Oh, yeah, good point.
like maybe healthcare or food service, use those experiences as examples
Exactly.
and highlight how you ensured compliance in those settings.
Yeah, it shows you can adapt to different environments.
Okay, perfect. Now for a question that lets you really showcase your passion for nature. Can you describe your experience with landscaping and horticulture?
Oh, I like this one.
Cemeteries are essentially landscape parks, right?
Okay.
So this is your chance to talk about your green thumb.
For sure.
What kind of experiences should we be prepared to discuss?
And anything related to gardening, lawn care, even just identifying plants. Have you ever designed a garden, maintained a lawn, taking care of houseplants? All of those show your knowledge and appreciation for the natural world.
Yeah, those are great. And if you have any formal training or certifications,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
landscaping or horticulture, definitely mention that.
It adds to your credibility. And it shows you're invested in professional development.
It's a big plus.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, and speaking of showcasing your skills,
Yep.
don't forget about RoleCatcher's AI. It can help you structure your responses to really highlight those strengths. You can input your experience, and the AI will suggest ways to highlight the relevant skills and tailor your answer to that specific job description.
So it's like having a personal career advisor,
Pretty much.
helping you put your best foot forward.
Exactly.
All right, let's move on to the final question in this section. This one focuses on creating a welcoming and inclusive environment. How do you ensure that the cemetery is welcoming and accessible to all visitors, regardless of ability or background?
Okay, this is an important one.
It's about understanding diversity and inclusion and showing that you're committed to creating a respectful and accessible environment for everyone who comes to the cemetery.
Right.
So what are some key points we should be ready to address?
I think physical accessibility is huge. So are there ramps for wheelchair users? Accessible restrooms? Clear signage that's easy to read and understand? Those are all crucial.
Those are all really important details.
Yeah.
What about cultural sensitivity? Cemeteries often serve a lot of different communities
Right.
with different religious and cultural practices.
Absolutely.
So think about things like multilingual signs and brochures,
Oh, yeah, good idea.
maybe designated areas for different religious practices.
Yeah, that's important too.
It's about those details
for sure.
and how they help create a truly inclusive environment.
Exactly.
These questions really highlight how multifaceted this job is.
Yeah.
It's so much more than just maintaining the grounds.
It really is.
It's about being a caretaker, a
Yeah.
facilitator,
Uh-huh.
a compassionate presence for people,
I agree.
both those who are grieving and those who are there to remember.
That's a great way to put it.
And it requires such a unique blend of skills, from technical expertise to emotional intelligence.
Totally.
Now, before we get to some final tips and strategies, let's touch on those career insights we got from the RoleCatcher Career Guide.
Okay, sounds good.
Because it's not just about acing this interview. It's about understanding the long-term prospects of this career path.
Exactly.
And the Career Guide mentions some things, like stable job growth, potential for advancement,
Oh, yeah, those are great.
maybe moving into a supervisory or management role, and the importance of continuous learning.
Absolutely. And you can weave those insights into your answers too, to show that you understand the industry and that you're committed to professional development. Like if you're talking about technology, you could mention how you want to stay up to date on the latest advancements and maybe even pursue some training opportunities.
Yeah, that's smart. It shows them that you're not just looking for a job. You're looking to build a career in this field.
For sure.
So that brings us to those final tips and strategies. We've prepped for the questions, we've practiced our delivery, we've even thought about our long-term career goals. So what else do we need to think about to really make a great impression?
Okay, well, it's all about those finishing touches, the ones that really make a difference. Like first impressions are key, especially in a sensitive environment like a cemetery.
So what does that mean in terms of how we dress? Like, what's the dress code for this kind of interview?
I think you want to project professionalism and respect. So think neat, tidy, and appropriate. I don't think you need a full suit. But clean and pressed clothes, polished shoes, a well-groomed appearance, these all go a long way.
It shows you're taking the interview seriously. You
Yeah.
understand the environment.
Exactly. Oh, and don't underestimate nonverbal communication either. A firm handshake, good eye contact, a genuine smile. Those can all make a positive connection.
It's about confidence and warmth.
Right.
Now let's talk about those behavioral questions, the ones they love to ask. Like,
Yeah.
tell me about a time when,
Oh, yeah. Those can be tricky, especially if you're not prepared.
yeah.
But they're really just opportunities to show off your skills, your experiences in action.
So how do we tackle those effectively?
Think back to situations where you demonstrated certain qualities, like problem solving, teamwork, leadership, or maybe a time when you went above and beyond. Have a few of those stories ready to go, ones that really highlight those strengths.
So like that story from before, about exceeding expectations.
Oh, yeah, perfect example.
Now's the time to polish that up and have it ready to impress.
Exactly. Oh, and RoleCatcher's AI can actually be super helpful here too. You can use it to brainstorm potential stories and even get feedback on how to structure your responses to make them as impactful as possible.
So it's like having a storytelling coach in your pocket.
Pretty much.
Okay, now what about those awkward silences? Those can sometimes happen during interviews.
Oh, yeah. I hate those.
They feel like forever.
Right.
So instead of panicking, how can we use those moments to our advantage?
Okay. See them as opportunities. Show that you're really listening. So take a breath. Reflect on the question. or maybe clarify anything that you might have missed. You could even turn it around and ask the interviewer a thoughtful question.
That's a good strategy. It shows that you're engaged.
Totally.
Speaking of questions, you should always have a few prepared for them, too.
Yes, good
It
point.
shows that you've done your research
That's
and that you're eager to learn more.
right.
So what kind of questions should we ask?
Well, think about the cemetery's specific challenges, or their plans for the future, or even the day-to-day responsibilities of the role. Asking insightful questions like that really shows you've put some thought into this opportunity.
That's great advice.
Oh, and here's a pro tip. Take notes during the interview.
Oh, that's a good one. It shows you're paying attention.
Yeah, and that you value what they're saying.
Exactly.
Just jot down a few keywords or phrases, things you can refer back to when it's your turn to ask questions.
So we're showing that we're actively listening.
Exactly. Engaged in the conversation.
Perfect. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to emphasize how valuable RoleCatcher's AI features can be, from tailoring your CV to practicing those interview responses.
Yeah.
It's such a useful tool for anyone getting ready for a cemetery attendant interview.
Definitely. And don't forget, it's not just about the technical stuff. You really want to connect with the deeper meaning of this work. Show them your passion for maintaining this place of remembrance and honoring those who've passed.
I think that authenticity will really resonate with the interviewer.
Me too.
All right, so we've covered a lot.
We have.
But before we finish this deep dive, I think we should talk about some more of those finishing touches.
Okay, good idea.
Things that can really make a difference.
Let's do it. All right, so finishing touches. Like we said, first impressions are everything, especially in a place like a cemetery.
Yeah, so let's talk about what to wear to the interview.
Okay, good idea.
What's the dress code?
Well, I think you want to project professionalism and respect. So think neat, tidy, and appropriate for the setting. I don't think you need a full suit, but clean, pressed clothes, polished shoes, well-groomed. Those things go a long way.
Yeah, it shows that you're taking it seriously.
Yeah, exactly.
That you understand this environment.
And don't forget about body language.
Oh, right.
Like a firm handshake, good eye contact, a genuine smile. Those can really create a good connection.
So it's about confidence,
Yeah?
but also warmth.
Exactly.
Now, what about those behavioral questions? Tell me about a time when questions.
Oh, yeah, those can be tricky if you're not prepared.
Right.
But they're really just opportunities to
Yeah.
show your skills in action.
So how do we handle those effectively?
I think it helps to think back to situations where you had to solve a problem, or you showed teamwork, leadership, or maybe a time when you went above and beyond. Have a few of those stories ready to go.
Like the one we talked about before, about exceeding expectations.
Oh, yeah, perfect example.
So now's the time to really polish that up and have it ready to impress.
Exactly. Oh, and RoleCatcher's AI can be really helpful here, too.
Oh, right.
You can use it to brainstorm stories and even get feedback on how to tell them for maximum impact.
It's like having a storytelling coach in your pocket.
Pretty much.
Okay, now for those awkward silences. Those can sometimes happen during interviews.
Oh, yeah, those are the worst.
They feel like they last forever.
Right.
So instead of panicking, how can we use them to our advantage?
Okay, well, instead of freaking out, see them as opportunities to show you're listening. Take a breath, think about the question, maybe ask for some clarification. You could even turn it around.
Yeah.
And ask the interviewer a question.
Oh, I like that. It shows you're engaged.
For sure.
Speaking of questions, always have a few ready to ask them.
Yes, good
It
point.
shows you've done your research.
Exactly.
So what kind of questions should we be asking?
Well, think about the cemetery's challenges, their plans for the future, even the day-to-day stuff. Asking those kind of insightful questions really shows you've thought about this opportunity.
That's great advice.
Oh, and here's a pro tip. Take notes during the interview.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
It shows you're paying attention.
And that you value what they're saying.
Exactly.
Just jot down a few keywords, things you can use later when it's your turn to ask questions.
So we're showing them that we're actively listening and engaged in the conversation.
Exactly.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's important to re-emphasize the value of RoleCatcher's AI. For anyone prepping for this interview,
For sure.
it can really help.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of cemetery attendants, I want to thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We hope you found this helpful and empowering.
We did our best.
And remember, with the right prep and a positive mindset, you can absolutely nail this interview.
Good luck out there.
And don't forget to check out the RoleCatcher website for even more resources.
Until next time.
Happy job hunting.